Hello, this is Simon from Film Stories, and I have to start this video with a bit of a confession that I just want to have a conversation about Kevin Costner and the Horizon films and sort of where we find cinema of its ilk at the moment. But I have to confess up front, I am not the most impartial observer of the work of Kevin Costner. I am a huge fan of his movies. Doesn't mean I love them all, but when I like them, I really, really like them. And I still maintain that in terms of a major actor in Hollywood over the last 20, 30 years, it's hard to find someone who chooses movies better. That, again, not everything hits, but there's usually something, even to his weakest films and his best ones, I absolutely adore. So when he announced he was making Horizon, an American saga, I should put the colon in. When he announced he was making Horizon, colon, I think there's a colon, an American saga, hyphen, part one, part two, part three, part four. Well, that was my marvel. That people can have as many cinematic universes as they like, all power to you. The thought of Costner directing 4 lengthy Western movies, I was in heaven. And I mean, I'm a big fan of Dances with Wolves. Don't mind the Postman. Absolutely adore Open Range. I think Open Range is a brilliant film, really well made as well. And so this Horizon project came to life. It's one he'd been talking about for like 20 years. I remember around the time of him making Open Range, and he's come out in interviews and talked about this since, that he was fairly open about the idea that he had this idea for something. And at that point, I think it was just one film and he just needed a few more million off Disney and then he could get it made. Disney wouldn't give the money, and so life went on. It didn't happen. Costner's film career sort of went down a little bit, then hit big with the Yellowstone TV series. Big salaries came back in and profile was back up, and so it was time to dig back into the world of Horizon. So, over the summer, Horizon, an American saga, part one, was released in cinemas. So, I'm going to look up for you now. It's quoted on Box Office Mojo as grossing $29 million in America, $7 million outside of America. Some of those were mine. Total worldwide gross of $36.1 million. Now, by my maths GCSE is a fairly weak one, but even I can work out that a film that cost in the region of $100 million before you started to market it, that's grossed $36 million at the box office, has left some red ink for the minute. Now, films live on, so it will continue to make money through streaming, might sell a few DVDs, stuff like that. It does have a bit of a gap just to fill there. But if the whole saga of 4 films goes on to be something special, then you start selling box sets. People still buy Batman and Robin. You know, that was a flop. People still buy copies of it 20 years later. Some people even watch it. Imagine that. So, Horizon, an American saga, hyphen, chapter 1. The film itself, I liked it, but I sort of got the sense when I was watching it wasn't going to do mass market numbers. It was against what summer blockbusters were for a start. A slow 3-hour Western took time telling its story. And also, really, I wrote about it at the time, it's 3 hours of getting dominoes into place. That there's not a lot of payoff in part one. So a couple of really excellent action sequences in there, but it's shepherding 3 stories to the point where you then segue into a trailer that comes out of nowhere for part 2. And then there's the credits. It's just like, oh, okay. So part 2 was scheduled to be released several weeks later. Warner Brothers through its New Line Cinema arm, picked up the release rights to the Horizon films in America, also here in the UK. The idea was release part 1, 6-8 weeks later, release part 2, 6 hours of Costner in a cinema over the summer. That, my friends, is what I call absolute bliss. Fate took a turn. The box office returns of Horizon, an American saga, hyphen, chapter 1, spooked Warner Brothers, really. And so it pulled the idea of leaving just a few weeks between the movies. And at the point this has been recorded, we do not have a release date for Horizon, an American saga, hyphen, chapter 2. Now, that has just debuted at the Venice Film Festival, as this has been recorded. The reviews have not been particularly kind. There was a hope that part 2 would really pick up the foundations that were put in place in part 1. Can you pick up foundations? I'm going to pursue the metaphor. Let's see where we go. But really just build on them, and a bit more would happen. Certainly the trailer we got at the end of chapter 1 suggested a far more kinetic chapter 2, but those who have seen it are suggesting No, you're much close. It's an improvement on chapter 1, which I quite liked, but it's still very much that style. This makes me happy, unlikely to make people in New Line Cinema, stroke Warner Brothers, marketing departments, release people. It's not likely to make them happy because the runes are that chapter 2 of Horizon is not going to make double the money of chapter 1. Now, this leaves Costner himself at something of a segue that this is a 4-part saga. Had he originally had all the money, he'd have shot all 4 parts by now. The idea was get the first 2 parts ready and then shoot chapters 3 and 4 back to back, and then it was shoot chapter 3 by itself and then chapter 4 next year. He shot 9 minutes of chapter 3 so we can have a trailer for it at the end of chapter 2, but the bulk of filming of 3 and 4 hasn't been done. A film studio has been set up in order to facilitate the filming. Costner, the story's very well known, is putting chunks of his own money in, but his bank balance, as much as he's a far richer man than I and has more property than I, does not cover the cost of 4 of these films and releasing them. And I mean, it's a $500 million gamble, I'd imagine, once you factor in a lot of the costs, and that probably doesn't even cover all the release and marketing. And it's going into one of the least commercial genre in cinema at the moment. Long films, slow film, just going completely against the grain. Again, something I'm really happy with. Most cinema goers slightly less keen. And so what this has led to is a lot of ink being spilled on what Costner is up to. The parallel is Francis Ford Coppola and his Megalopolis epic that's going at the same time that Francis Ford Coppola sold half a vineyard to help pay for. I mean, isn't that great, isn't it? I mean, as much as it is putting your hand in your own pocket, it's quite useful when you've got a vineyard to flog in order to fund your films. All power to him. But Coppola's just making 1 film. Costner's making 4. Coppola is directing but isn't in front of the camera. Costner is starring, producing, writing, directing. He's wearing this very much on his sleeve. There's very few other places to place the blame if you don't like the film. And Costner is carrying on. And so, I mean, we've sort of been through this before in Costner's career, around the time that he turned down, I think it was The Hunt for Red October, in order to pursue making Dances with Wolves, and the Hollywood trade press ridiculed him. Kevin's Gate, they called it, a reference to the notorious Hollywood flop Heaven's Gate. And, I mean, Costner was going to land flat on his face, but what do you know? He ended up with a whole lot of money, and his film got 7 Oscars, and Dances with Wolves is what year are we now? 2024. So that's over 30 years later. It is still talked about. But the whole thing now is at something of a crossroads, and that's kind of just what I wanted to talk about, because I mean, Costner, he's a rich man, right? But still, he's put his money where his mouth is. And I respect that. If I didn't like the film, I'd still respect it. The fact that I quite liked it, yeah. But Costner himself has now admitted that Chapter 3 is going to be a challenge. He's been quoted, I've just got the quote here, as saying that, I mean, he can't lose the momentum. He said, I have to hurry up and not let the rock fall back downhill. I've got to go put my hands on it again and start to push it up. And this was when he was talking about the film at the Venice Film Festival. Got a 3-minute standing ovation, I think. I don't know why we measure films in standing ovations. I just love the idea that there's all these publicists around with a stopwatch, seeing how long they get and then bashing out the press release. Costner just then said, it's a rope that I cannot let go of. He said, and it's the first time he's been this overt about it, I don't know how I'm going to make Chapter 3 right now, but I'm going to make it. Now, 2 statements there. Number 1, that he's going to make it. I believe him, but still the clock is ticking here. He has a cast and he's got, he needs to make commitments to those casts. Also, he can't wait 10 years to make Chapter 3 because his cast will then visibly age on screen. And the Horizon films are due to span 15 years, but I mean, I don't know where the script of Chapter 3 goes, but I'd be amazed if we suddenly see characters jump 10 years in age. We might do. It might pan out like that. I don't know. But also, it's the fact that he doesn't know how he's going to make it. Where's the money coming from? And if you follow his social media accounts, you see him like turning up in Dubai and places like that. And presumably there's a lot of tin rattling going on. But still, this feels like the first time that he's coming up to the buffers. since he started shooting the movies. That there's a lot of anticipation with chapter 1, a degree of anticipation with chapter 2, just to see which way it goes. And the fact that the initial response to it is more along the same lines, it suggests that challenges lie ahead. Now, it's quite interesting that out of film festivals at the moment, we've seen reviews come in of the second Joker film, and the second Joker film's reviews have been quite tepid. And now we're seeing the box office expectations of that downgraded. And it's quite interesting in an era where film reviewers are supposed to have not a lot of power, and rightly so, in my view. It's quite interesting to see that there's still a bit of power out there, that the negative response to Joker 2 is downgrading expectations with Warner Brothers. And for the future of the Horizon films, the slightly negative response towards Horizon's second movie is also presenting some challenge as Costner goes out to try and find the money to make his film. I think this is where cinema goers have to come out to bat for filmmakers of this ilk. I don't think you should go and watch film. I don't think any of us should go and just watch a film just for the hell of it, or just because someone's taken a big swing. But I do think it might be time to put some of those poison pens away and some of those poison comments away, and just say, even if I don't like it, you can't accuse the man of just taking the safe route here. You can't accuse him of going off and doing a secret. He's not doing The Bodyguard 4. I mean, I'd quite like to see it, but he's not doing something of that ilk. The guy's in his late 60s and has decided to take a massive swing. And, if the swing ultimately misses, I hope it misses with him having the chance to complete all 4 of these films. As it stands, I think that's looking about 50-50. Start of the year, I think it would have been 80-20 he's going to get them made. And this is as big a test in how to push a metaphorical boulder uphill as arguably he's faced since Dances with Wolves and films of that ilk. Still, this is me. I've not been around much this summer because of a whole family thing going on, and I wanted to write loads in support of Costner. So this is too little too late, really, but it is a contribution to just those voices that say, let's support the people who take a swing. Let's support the people who take a gamble. And if you're a Costner nerd like me, let's all just start arguing with Warner Brothers to get a release date for chapter 2. We don't have that in cinemas at the moment. And let's count down the days to chapter 3 as well. Got to be worth a try.